start the main event.
I meant to ask you, Bassam, are you here on assignment or are you...
I have an interesting assignment for automobile. I drove up here in a Singer 911, Porsche 911.
Okay.
Rough duty.
Oh, my
We're throwing
heart.
you out of the booth now because that's the most annoying thing I've heard all day.
And then I'm driving back in a Cayman GTS. So I'm bookending the experience with the sort of fringes of the outlaw Porsche culture, which is, it's a thing.
While the car gets underway, for the viewers who may not know, tell us what a Singer treatment is on a Porsche.
So a Singer is, if you can imagine redoing every little detail on a car, on a what looks like a long-nose 911, but is actually 964 series 911, and carbon fiber body panels. It weighs 2,600 pounds, and it's got a tuned 4-liter engine that produces 400 horsepower. And immaculately finished, beautiful woven leather interiors. Cost about $500,000.
Yep, right down
And
to the stitching and the
long waiting
upholstery.
list for one.
Yep. Well, the race is underway. Factory driver Jörg Bergmeister was out front alongside Tim Pappas. Kevin Estre, another Porsche factory shoe, in there as well.
I know this is supposed to be somewhat of a vintage race, and the fact that a lot of these are worth a fair chunk of change, but these boys they're running pretty hard here in the opening couple of corners.
That's Bergmeister in the Falcon Tire car. Number 45. Flying Lizard 911. And these guys are getting after it.
Thinking about 3 wide there going into 5.
Who else is out there? Cooper McNeil. Johannes van Overbeek. These are names known to race fans around the country. James Safronis.
And a lot of guys that race these cars in their heyday.
They know them well. Up the Ray Hall straight to the signature corner here. The corkscrew.
This is, without a doubt, one of the most aggressive races we've seen all weekend.
Having covered motorsports for over 30 years, this is like my life passing before my eyes. Oh,
Right.
I remember that car. Oh, love that car. Oh, yeah, that car. Number 68 from the Racers.
Somebody
group.
off into the dust. 2 cars around, including...
That's Tim Pappas in the 54. Did they get together? Is it the other one? Car is 121.
Yeah, Tim's got that 2016 Porsche GT3R. That's that green, black, and chrome car that ran in the Daytona 24 hours, and he's spinning the right wheel. He's pretty much beached that thing. I'm betting we might see a full course caution, as they probably are going to have to pull that one out of there. I don't know if they'll consider that a safe zone at this point or not.
David Calvert-Jones in the 121 machine, but the
That's
race goes
Cooper
on.
McNeil in the 22T. It's a 2016 Porsche GT3R as well.
There's Jörg. Told the story yesterday as a young man getting into the karting world. He got some expert coaching from a guy who would eventually be known as 7-time world champion in Formula One, Michael Schumacher.
York's car is a 2012 GT3 RSR, part of the Falcon Tire team for the 2012 season. Ran in 17 ALMS events back then, 3 podiums and a win at Baltimore.
That's Kevin Estre in the second Falcon machine. Those cars were driven in period in the IMSA championship by factory driver Wolf Hensler and Brian Sellers from my neck of the woods down around Road Atlanta. They won back-to-back Petite Le Mans season enders in what is now the WeatherTech Sports Car Series.
That car that Esther is in was brought out of retirement at the end of the 2013 season, and it actually won at Petite Le Mans, which is coming up in a matter of 2 weeks or so. Is that full course caution?
Double yellows. I guess they decided they want to go get those cars out of the bunker.
Bassam, have you done any racing?
I've spent a ton of time on the track, but never competitively, and I've taken a bunch of courses. I just took the Ferrari Corsa Pilota program, and I've done the Lamborghini Esperienza, so I'm getting my racing license, but I have not competed yet.
Well, one guy who has quite a racing resume is our Justin Bell.
I'm doing a really bad job of actually leaving the vendor area here, because as the crew and I were driving through, we were saying, oh, look at that car, what should we see next? And the Carrera GT, just take a look at it. It's still worth stopping and having a look. And I know in my world I've seen a handful of them, but just to see one up close reminds you of what a technological marvel it was. This is a 2005 Carrera GT, and actually it was 542nd of the 1,270 examples that were ever made. You know what? He took delivery of it directly from the Porsche factory, and while the original invoice price was $448,000, I have a sort of sneaky suspicion that this is worth a bit more than that now. And as I look over at the front, I've never actually seen one of these guys when you look at the sticker price under there, but you think about the horsepower on this, you think it's got that suede saddle interior. It's a bit dusty here out in the paddock, but what an outrageous car. Jay Leno has one, and of course it's a bit of a polarizing car, but wow. You know, I have this virtual showroom, virtual car collection like I know all the TV guys do have, because we don't have any money to do it. But in my virtual showroom, the Carrera GT has a spot. But right now, I am going to leave, because the next time you hear from me, I will be in my race suit in pit lane, guys. And I got to go and get prepped, because my dad overtook me this morning, and that was a disaster. So I need to get faster.
Justin, would you have taken the Carrera GT or a 918? You got to pick one or the other.
Why?
As your lawyer, I'd advise you not to answer that question.
If you know anything about the bells, when faced with a difficult choice, we just take both. That was normally in our dating. That was normally dating, I have to say. Anyway, carry on.
I love it, Justin. And I noticed your voice cracked when you mentioned 448 large for that car. Mine would have as well. Now, Justin mentioned that he was out practicing this morning when he had a bit of a family spat with his old man, 5-time Le Mans winner Derek Bell. And it was quite the moment. I wasn't sure I understood why Justin took it so hard, but you're about to find out in a moment. Well, we await this yellow flag to be withdrawn.
You know, it's funny, the lore of the Carrera GT, a friend of mine had one, and he just bought another one. He's so obsessed with the car.
It is a special car.
It's completely engaging.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as Justin said, it is a polarizing car, right? It's one of those cars that design-wise, you maybe love it or don't. It has a unique look to it, the way behind the cockpit, it just pretty much comes to a straight end, and then you have the engine back there. I personally like the lines on the 918 a little bit better. But again, you can't argue with the performance of the GT.
Well, now let's take you to that seminal moment in motorsports history this morning. There is Derek Bell and the Lowenbrow special that he shared with Al Holbert for so many years in IMSA competition, going right by Bell Jr. in a K3.
Well, the great thing about racing drivers is we're very proficient with the excuses that we have for lack of performance. I just got overtaken by the Lowenbrow Porsche. Now, I have no excuses to give you, because you taught me all the excuses I know, Dad, and you went by me out there.
Yeah, a bit embarrassing, really. Fortunately, I didn't know. Otherwise, I'd have just had to stay behind, wouldn't I? But no, I didn't know it was you. Obviously, I was too bloody busy keeping on the road, to be honest.
But of course, Dad, you're in this car now. Just tell you, this car is probably, as you just told me, the winningest Porsche in American racing history. You and Al Holbert, you had some dominating rides in this. What's it like being reunited with this car here?
It's fantastic, obviously. It's phenomenal. Only when I got in yesterday, I thought, God, this feels a bit wild. And then I realized I think it's 31 years since I drove it last. So it's a hell of a long time. And I've never really driven anything like this again, because my career finished the day Al sort of died, sadly. But it's wonderful to see his son, Todd, over there, who's sort of very much part of our days. I remember when he was a kid, and there he is, sort of here as a major player in motor racing. So, you know, the legend carries on through his son, and that's wonderful.
Now, this car, it wasn't just Lowenbrow as the sponsor. It wasn't just the fact it was a Porsche. It was really that was an era when the drivers, the two of you were in the car. You became part of Porsche folklore. As you walk around here, it's like you're one half, it's like you're part of the two Ronnies, but there's only one Ronnie, you know, and that's a British comedy series for those of you that don't know.
But we weren't a comedy series.
We weren't a comedy, it was deadly serious, but his impact, Al's impact on North American Porsche racing was so meaningful. It's so beautiful that the legacy is still carrying on.
Oh, well, absolutely, and I think that's the greatest thing about this classic or historic racing is it's allowing us and the owners, these wonderful owners that own them, who I haven't yet met, for example, you know, allows us guys to drive the cars that we drove in the period and to show them to the public, because in years gone by it'd be stuck in a museum somewhere covered in dust and dust sheets. So, you know, I think it's wonderful we get these events like this incredible Porsche event and other ones around the world to show off the pieces of art.
And in that quiet moment when you're sitting in there before you go out and your hands are on the wheel, I sat in it earlier and took a little video. In the quiet, it's quite emotional, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just to hold on and know that's where your hands and feet and Al's hands and feet went.
Well, it's funny enough, it's a similar thing which you experienced, you may not remember, but at Le Mans. And when you go down that Mulsanne, when we used to, not in this car, but with Al, but down that Mulsanne without the chicanes, you get time to think because you're full throttle for a whole minute. And you just sitting there and the buzz of the engine and the view and everything, and you're in your own little world, and it's very, very special and unique, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad we shared it together in '92. You're doing it again here. And let's just go back to your first comment. You haven't even met the owner who gives you effectively the keys to a, I don't know, conservatively $10-15 million Porsche. There you are.
Aren't we lucky? And I really appreciate it, but I think everybody does. And to see all these cars here and the people that built them and the guys that drove them is spectacular.
Perfect. That's why it's called the Porsche Rennsport Reunion.
Yeah.
Puts people and their cars together, guys.
And your son, too.
And your son.
My son, sorry.
Oh, yeah, not mine.
That's right. Justin's son Oliver has a few years to go yet before he'll be out there racing with his dad. And you heard the mention of the name Al Holbert. Well, tomorrow marks the 30th anniversary of the death of Al Holbert, one of the greatest endurance drivers in American history, also an inspired engineer and the first president of Porsche Motorsports North America. As we get back to green flag action on the track, Al Holbert died in the crash of the private plane he was flying from a race in Columbus, Ohio, to watch his son Todd, whom you heard Derek Bell mention, is here this weekend. Todd was playing in a football game that night. Dad wanted to get home, and it was an absolutely huge, catastrophic loss to sports car racing and IndyCar racing, which Porsche was getting a toe in the water thanks to Al Holbert's efforts. Al Holbert is very much missed. Just one of the great names of Porsche history that we remember on a weekend like Reunion.
As we get back to the racing action, Jörg Bergmeister continues to lead the group in the 117. We're watching the battle for fourth. Cooper McNeil is in fifth place in the white, black, and green, number 22 with the T on it. Kurt Wagner is just in front of him in the 23, which is a 2015 Porsche 991 GT3 Cup car that finished second at this year's 25 Hours of Thunder Hill. It was a big endurance race held here in California. Court's been a long-time enthusiast.
He's been a
race for many years.
Pro driver for quite a number of years from Southern California. He's painted up in the colors of Porsche's GTLM factory effort in IMSA racing. Up the hill to the Ray Hall Straight and the corkscrew turn. You notice the WeatherTech livery on Cooper McNeil's car behind. That's the car Cooper drove for years in domestic American sports car racing before switching to a Ferrari. And those colors and that car number are unmistakable. Brumos Racing for decades, founded by Peter Gregg, carried on by Hurley Haywood, Andrew Davis, and a number of other drivers. Andrew behind the wheel right now. 911 GT3 from 2011. Now keep in mind, these are all very talented people up front, separating themselves from the field of owner drivers. Always good fun watching the pros mix it up.
The 59A, Andrew Davis driving that one, as you mentioned, one of the Brumos racing cars. That's a 2011 GT3 Cup car.
It's just an iconic livery. Bassett, you mentioned that you're seeking your racing license. So what are your plans? What will you do with it? Where will you make your debut?
Honestly, it's more about access for me than anything, because I have driven a few race cars, but I want to drive more. And it's really more about the storytelling aspect of getting in there and talking about what makes a race car special. Because if you spend enough time in passenger cars or even high-performance exotics, you realize that there's this dividing line between what you can buy for the road and what you can buy for the track. And, the ironic thing is now a lot of production exotic cars have more horsepower than race cars.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we're talking 700 horsepower is the new 600, which was the new 500. So that's gotten kind of out of hand. But when it comes to chassis and handling and downforce, it's just another ball game with race cars. So it's really about that.
Well, and you mentioned supercars with that kind of horsepower. You really don't even have to go to the supercar category. You can go to your local Dodge dealer and get one with 700 horsepower.
We live in a fascinating time. Seriously,
Yes.
the amount of horsepower you can get. When I was 16, I had a 5-liter Mustang, and I thought it was the greatest car in the world because it had 225 horsepower.
It was a big number then.
And now it's like a laughable number. Civic Si is approaching that number, and it's like, it's just a different world now.
Right. What else is approaching a different world, Bob, is the price of Porsches when it comes to the collectability of the brand.
Well, yeah, the numbers are going up all the time on collector cars. They outpace the stock market. And an auction expert I spoke with once said automobiles, collector cars, the real creme de la creme, are increasing in value at a rate second only to works of art. And that's a pretty sobering thought.
But I feel like we're reaching a tipping point.
Do you?
I don't want to use the word bubble, but I think there's a plateau, and everything is cyclical. I think it might be softening, at least at a certain level.
Okay. I'll buy that. But your point about horsepower in the modern cars, like that GT that Justin was looking at, that is not a car for your novice driver. That is something that takes training and skills to handle safely and appropriately.
Well, that's one of the prettiest cars you'll see here. That one right there, the 72, and an iconic paint scheme, of course, from champion Porsche out of Florida, Dave Mirage's organization, the late great Dave Mirage, who we recently lost. That's a 1991 Porsche 911 GT2, initially raced in IMSA's Supercar Series in '93 by Nick Ham. Competed in the Daytona 24 Hours, 12 Hours of Sebring, ran Watkins Glen as well. Derek Bell, Hans Stuck, Ed Davies, many famous Porsche racers.
Bill Adam.
Yep, Bill Adam ran for champion as well.
It's a great example of dealer-sponsored racing at a very high professional level.
So Alex Job walking through the paddock earlier. Bob, of course, Alex and his race team, legendary when it came to racing the 911 in sports car competition in IMSA and American Le Mans Series.
It's great to see Alex here. I believe I saw that he prepared one of those Porsche tractors that we saw earlier out there, giving everybody a smile. It's fascinating to see how the cars, seen by themselves, it can be hard to pick out the changes in the 911 racing models from season to season. But when you see that car that Andrew Davis is driving, for example, compared to this one, a much more recent version of the 911, you see that it has gotten a lot more muscular.
A little lower, a little wider.
The fender flares. Well, just look at the difference between the two Falcon cars. The newer one up ahead.
Well, and this is one of the categories where it really was about customer racing, wasn't it? Porsche designing the car, making the car available for different teams to purchase, put hot racing drivers behind the wheel, and go get Porsche victories and add to their win totals.
Well, a lot of that goes back to what we talked about yesterday and Porsche's corporate policy of selling turnkey race cars, making racing much more accessible, particularly to the private enthusiast who wants to go racing. I mean, you could buy a Porsche and be right there with state-of-the-art technology. They had the parts truck at the racetrack, so you didn't need to keep a big store of supplies for your racing effort. I mean, it really was a smart way to go racing, and it sure sold a lot of Porsches.
You know, as we look at the 911 and you see, you're talking about, Bob, the variety of the styles and how it's evolved over time, but a big part of that is just how that rear spoiler has changed on the 911 over years within racing. And it brought up something I was thinking about earlier. So I was just driving out to the racetrack. It's ducktail or whale tail. You know, are you a fan of one or the other? How about you, Bassam? Are you a ducktail guy or a whale tail guy?
Whale tail all the way. I mean, I love the RSR, and you can't mess with that legend, but aesthetically, I just love the big tail.
How about you, Bob?
You know, that's a great question. I think I'd go with the whale tail as well.
I'm definitely the whale tail category, yeah. And you look at these cars here, and you can just see the variety of rear wings that have been mounted on these over the years. And
let's just take a look at the car we saw introduced yesterday, the new generation track-only 935, of which they're going to make 77 models, and it is just fabulous looking. Got that long, you know, the final iteration, let's call it, of the race car, the 935. I mean, you can just see it in this new Porsche that's coming out. Elongated, long tail, big rear wing, but lots of state-of-the-art amenities. The technology under the hood, if you will.
Based on a GT2 RS.
Yep. With the contemporary styling cues, I have to say the car is a knockout. I think it really looks good, combining the current tail lights with the old body style reminiscent of Moby Dick.
Don't you wish it could have been street legal, though? That would be so cool.
Well, maybe you know the answer to this question, and we're going to see 959s on track later. There's a bunch of them here this weekend with license plates. I know the car is about 25 years old now, so it may come under the legal exception for making cars like that street legal. I don't think the 959 originally was in this country, but now they've got plates down there. They've been registered, I guess.
There was the Bill Gates incident where he imported a car but could not legally register it, so it sat for years, which triggered a small group of enthusiasts, including Seinfeld, to work towards making it work legally. Bruce Canepa here at Scotts Valley is kind of the 959 guru, and he's known for his work in legalizing them and souping them up. Now he squeezes more power out of them, but they're just amazing machines. I mean, the technology back in the 80s that they had, I mean, some cars are still catching up to that.
Yeah. Nobody's catching up to York Bergmeister at this point. He's lapping through the back half of the field.
Well, that's what we expect of Porsche factory drivers in, 2012 technology. Not all that long ago.
Which, by the way, I think is one of the all-time great positions to have. Porsche factory driver. Patrick Long might have the greatest job position in all of motorsports.
I'm not jealous of a lot of people, but that's one thing.
There's one of them.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he's a good guy, too.
He is a great guy.
Talking to him, his air-cooled events that he has come up with and is putting on, he's now taking them worldwide, and he said that's really becoming quite the happening every time they do more.
Dave Ondrzejak in an ex-racers group, Kevin Buckler-inspired 911, car number 65. You see TRG on the door, being lapped by the front runners. He is in 37th place.
The other car you just saw back there, Jeff Lewis, is in the 155, the red car, which was a 93 Porsche 964 RSR, one of 51 factory-built Carrera RSR race cars.
It's one of the biggest classes we'll see. 51 registered. 7 cars failed to take the green flag, but that still leaves 44 machines out there.
The brown one there is David Calvert-Jones, 2016 GT3R.
Calvert-Jones was up at the tail end of that lead group. He's fallen back to 14th. Wayne Rainey corner, plunging downhill. As always, television doesn't do the elevation changes justice. But from the top of the corkscrew down to turn 10, as they approach turn 11, that is quite a drop.
Some 40 feet, basically like falling down an elevator shaft.
Here's something to think about. They hold one of the biggest bicycle celebrations in the world here at WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca in English. It's called the Sea Otter Classic. It happens every year. And they do parallel slalom, and they do mountain biking, and they have a road race, and the road race makes some laps of this racetrack. Now, can you imagine going down the corkscrew on a bicycle in the middle of a peloton of 120 or so riders?
You know, the car that Johannes van Overbeek is driving here, which was a 2004 996 Cup car, is actually the first Flying Lizard liveried Porsche. Took pole of the 2004 24 Hours of Daytona.
Seth Nyman's team. Oh, somebody getting the dirt up, driver's right. That car in the lime green roof line just going over the top. Here it comes. That's the White Lightning Porsche that competed in the American Le Mans Series, went to Le Mans, and was very successful over the years. Carlos de Quesada from, I believe he's Florida domiciled. Regular at Florida races, the Rolex, Sebring.
It's an incredibly reliable car, too, to go racing with. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. The Porsche 911 and all of these variations is a easy car when it comes to racing to buy and go racing with.
Off the final corner comes Jörg Bergmeister. We may see the checkered flag this time by, and
Yep.
we do. So Bergmeister takes the victory and presumably pole position for the races to come this weekend.
Oh, boy.
Whoa!
Hang on.
Desperate men do desperate things. And they pay for them, losing track position.
Yeah, there's Sofronis, right there in the 66, I believe.
There's de Quesada. Let's have another look there. Just a little bit outside. So he gets on the brakes, the car squirms. Couldn't get it into position going into the corner around the outside and pays the penalty. And meanwhile, on their lap of honor, waving to the crowd, Jörg Bergmeister and Kevin Estre. Estre, the Frenchman, one of the more recent additions to Porsche's worldwide works driver lineup.
You know, it's kind of interesting, too, when you think about it with vintage racing or historic racing or, you know, whatever you want to call it these days, because something like this kind of falls somewhere in between. It's a very unique situation for the brands, isn't it? You think about Lowenbrow, for example, and Gulf stopped paying for that package how many years ago? And it is they're getting a lot of mileage out of that.
You know what kind of bums me out is when you see brands like Marlboro that have been eliminated from cars. Like you go to McLaren headquarters in Woking now, and they have removed the Marlboro branding. It's a piece of history.
Right.
There's a look at your top finishers, and Ernie Francis Jr. is shown